Iranian ballistic missiles just hit Saudi Arabia in a surprise evening strike. Not a drone, not a proxy attack from Yemen that Riyadh can manage diplomatically by attributing it to the Houthis. Direct Iranian ballistic missiles fired from Iranian territory, striking Saudi soil. And in the hours since those missiles landed, every major Gulf country has taken the same action simultaneously. The UAE shut down its airspace. Qatar shut down its airspace. Kuwait shut down its airspace. Bahrain shut down its airspace. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest aviation hubs on the planet, stopped accepting flights. Doha's Hamad International Airport halted operations. Every Gulf airline grounded its fleet. Every international carrier operating into the Gulf suspended its routes. And the message that all of those simultaneous airspace closures are sending to the world is the same message that the silence following the Doha strikes sent about what was burning inside the facility. When every government in a region makes the same decision at the same time without coordination, without a joint statement, without a multilateral process, it means every one of those governments independently assessed that the threat environment had changed so severely and so suddenly that closing the airspace was less catastrophic than leaving it open. That assessment was made within hours of Iran hitting Saudi Arabia. The Gulf is not in panic. The Gulf has looked at what just happened to Saudi Arabia and made a rational calculation about what comes next. And that calculation produced airspace closures across every major aviation hub in the region simultaneously. In the next few minutes, I will show you exactly what Iran struck in Saudi Arabia, why the specific targets chosen are more alarming than the strike itself, what the simultaneous Gulf airspace closures mean for the global economy and for the American military posture in the region, and why Iran hitting Saudi Arabia with direct ballistic missiles is the single development in this conflict that changes the strategic geometry of the entire Middle East. Before we get into it, thanks for watching. Your support is what keeps this going, and I genuinely appreciate every one of you here. Make sure you are subscribed and like the video so more people can follow this. Now, let's get into it. To understand why the Saudi strike is categorically different from every previous Iranian strike in this conflict, you need to understand what Saudi Arabia represents in the strategic architecture of the Middle East, and why Iran hitting it directly crosses a line that has not been crossed in the history of the two countries' rivalry. Iran and Saudi Arabia have been engaged in a proxy competition for regional influence for decades. That competition has been fought through proxies in Yemen, where Houthi forces backed by Iran have struck Saudi infrastructure repeatedly since 2015. It has been fought through proxies in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, and across the Levant, where Iranian-backed militias have pursued Iranian strategic objectives in ways that maintain a degree of deniability between TRAN and the specific kinetic events that advance those objectives. The proxy layer has been essential to managing the Saudi-Iranian competition below the threshold of direct state-on-state conflict. Direct Iranian ballistic missiles fired from Iranian territory and landing on Saudi soil remove that proxy layer entirely. There is no deniability, there is no attribution ambiguity. Iranian missiles were launched from Iran and landed in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia cannot manage that event through the diplomatic frameworks it has used to manage Houthi strikes. It cannot describe it as a proxy provocation requiring a measured response calibrated to avoid direct escalation with Iran. It has to respond to an act of direct state-on-state aggression in a way that is proportional to what has actually happened, rather than to the deniable proxy version of what has happened. That requirement puts Saudi Arabia in a position it has spent decades of careful diplomacy working to avoid. The specific targets Iran chose inside Saudi Arabia are the element of this morning's strike that deserves the most careful analysis, because they tell you precisely what Iran was trying to achieve beyond the immediate military damage. Iran did not strike Saudi military bases. It did not strike Saudi civilian infrastructure in the way it has struck Israeli civilian infrastructure throughout this conflict. It struck two categories of target that are more strategically significant than either of those options. The first category was Saudi oil infrastructure. The Ras Tanura export terminal on the eastern coast, the most important single oil export facility in the world, received impacts that have disrupted export operations. The Abqaiq processing facility, whose destruction the intelligence community has assessed would remove approximately 5% of global daily oil supply from the market, was struck in the same salvo. These are not targets chosen for military effect. They are targets chosen for economic effect measured on a global scale. The disruption of Ras Tanura and Abqaiq simultaneously does not just hurt Saudi Arabia. It removes production capacity from the global oil market at a moment when the Strait of Hormuz is already closed, when the IEA has already released its largest ever emergency reserve package, and when oil is already trading above 100 a barrel. The combined effect of Hormuz's closure in Ras Tanura and Abqaiq disruption on global oil supply is not additive, it is multiplicative. Every barrel that cannot flow through Hormuz was supposed to be partially compensated by Saudi production and export through alternative routes. That compensation mechanism just got struck. The second category of target was the airspace control infrastructure. Iran struck Saudi air traffic management facilities and radar installations covering the airspace over the eastern Arabian Peninsula. Those facilities are not just Saudi civilian aviation infrastructure. They are the radar and communication systems that provide air situational awareness over the approaches to the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Their degradation reduces the air picture available to U.S. military assets operating in the theater and to the Gulf states trying to monitor Iranian air activity in real time. Iran hit the Saudi oil export infrastructure and the regional air situational awareness infrastructure in the same salvo. It hit the economic weapon and the military sensor simultaneously. That targeting combination is not improvised. It is the product of a targeting plan that has been developed over months and that was executed this morning. At the moment, Iran assessed the Saudi strike would produce maximum effect. The Gulf airspace closure picture is the dimension of this story that is going to have the most immediate and most visible impact on the daily lives of people far beyond the Middle East. Dubai International Airport handles approximately 90 million passengers per year. It is a critical hub for air travel between Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Its closure does not just strand passengers traveling to and from Dubai. It disrupts the routing of a significant portion of global aviation traffic that uses Gulf hubs as connecting points. Doha's Hamad International Airport is Qatar Airways' home base. Qatar Airways operates one of the most extensive long-haul networks in the world, connecting destinations across 6 continents. Its grounding does not just affect passengers flying Qatar Airways. It removes a major carrier from routes where it provides significant capacity, producing ripple effects through the global aviation market. The simultaneous closure of every major Gulf aviation hub is not a military event. It is a global economic event that is going to affect flight routes, cargo logistics, and air freight pricing worldwide within 24 hours, and it is a direct consequence of Iran striking Saudi Arabia. The American military dimension of the Saudi strike is the most immediate strategic consequence for the trajectory of this conflict, and it requires specific analysis. The United States maintains significant military presence in Saudi Arabia. Prince Sultan Air Base, which was struck earlier in this conflict, and where 5 K-Cone 135 Strat tankers were destroyed on the ground, was a primary hub for U.S. air operations in the theater. Al Air Base in Qatar, which Iran struck in the opening phase of the conflict, was the forward headquarters of U.S. Air Forces Central. With both of those facilities damaged, and the broader Gulf airspace now closed by sovereign decisions of the host nations, the logistics architecture that the United States military has been using to sustain air operations in this conflict is under pressure from multiple simultaneous directions. The Gulf states that have been providing basing and overflight access for American military operations are now managing a direct Iranian attack on Saudi Arabia and a regional airspace closure simultaneously. Every Gulf government that has been balancing its relationship with Washington against its need to avoid becoming a direct target of Iranian retaliation is now making that calculation in a dramatically different threat environment than existed before this morning. Saudi Arabia cannot respond to a direct ballistic missile strike on its territory without a response. That response will either be Saudi military action against Iran, which Riyadh is not capable of conducting independently at scale, or Saudi alignment with the U.S.-Israel coalition that produces the deeper military integration that Iran's earlier strikes on Prince Sultan Air Base were designed to deter. Iran's calculation in striking Saudi Arabia appears to be that the strike would either deter deeper Saudi military cooperation with the U.S.-Israel coalition by demonstrating the cost of that cooperation, or would pull Saudi Arabia into the coalition on terms that expose Riyadh to further escalation. Either outcome serves Iranian strategic interests compared to Saudi Arabia, remaining in the ambiguous position it has been occupying, where it was providing passive support to U.S. operations without formally aligning with the coalition. The oil market response to the Saudi strike is going to be the most visible immediate global consequence, and it is arriving in real time. Brent crude was already trading above 100 a barrel before this morning. The disruption of Ras Tanura and Abqaiq, combined with the Gulf airspace closure and the ongoing Hormuz closure, is going to produce a price response when markets open that has no modern precedent outside of the 1,973 oil embargo. The IRGC's stated objective of reaching 200 per barrel, which was dismissed as bravado when it was announced at the beginning of this conflict, is now a mathematical consequence of what Iran has destroyed in the past 24 hours, rather than a threat requiring further Iranian action. The arithmetic runs like this. The Hormuz closure has already removed a significant portion of Gulf oil export capacity from the market. The Ras Tanura and Abqaiq strikes have now disrupted Saudi production and export capacity. The Gulf airspace closure has disrupted the logistics networks that energy companies use to manage their operations in the region. And the oil market, which has been watching all of this develop and which opened above 100 before any of this morning's events, does not have a price ceiling available to it. That reflects the supply disruption produced by all three of those developments occurring simultaneously. 200 is not Iran's ceiling. It may be the floor that the market finds after absorbing what happened this morning. The question that no government and no market analyst had a satisfactory answer to before this morning is now the central question of the global economy. How long can the world operate under the supply conditions that Iran has created? Not the Hormuz closure alone, not the Saudi infrastructure strike alone. The combination of all the supply disruptions Iran has produced across the past weeks of this conflict, arriving simultaneously in a market that has already exhausted the IEA's emergency reserve capacity, with the largest emergency reserve release in that organization's history, having failed to stabilize prices before this morning's Saudi strike. The answer to that question is measured not in months, but in weeks. And the governments of every major economy, watching their fuel prices, their industrial input costs, their agricultural logistics costs, and their political approval ratings respond to what happened this morning, are going to be driving the next phase of this conflict's trajectory in ways that the military balance between Iran and Israel cannot determine on its own. The open question that the Saudi strike leaves over everything is the simplest and most devastating question available. If Iran is willing to strike Saudi Arabia directly, is there any target in the Middle East it is not willing to strike? And the answer that this conflict has produced to every previous version of that question has been the same answer every time. No. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If Iran's simultaneous targeting of Ras Tanura, Abqaiq, and Saudi air situational awareness infrastructure in the same salvo tells you that the strike was planned to produce maximum economic and military effect simultaneously rather than to achieve a single objective, what does that planning sophistication tell you about what other target combinations Iran has already prepared for the next phase? And at what point does the combination of Hormuz's closure, Ras Tanura disruption, and Gulf airspace shutdown produce oil prices that make the political cost of continuing this war higher than the political cost of accepting Iranian ceasefire terms for every government currently involved? Let me know below. Subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated on this, and click the video on screen to see another one. I will see you soon.